All right, gents, welcome to the next module. Today we're talking sleep, stress, and weight loss, the ultimate weight loss masterclass, and how to optimize your body, brain, and your lifestyle. We all know sleep is important, but why? 1 in 3 adults don't get enough sleep. And they say that 77% of people experience regular stress, which both can wreck metabolism, mood, and recovery. So if we look at the overall picture, stress and poor sleep are silent killers of energy, health, and fat loss. And we're going to discover why you absolutely need to improve the quality of your sleep and reduce your stress if you're looking to lose as much body fat and be as healthy as you possibly can. Sleep is in charge of everything, fuels everything: memory and focus, immune function, fat burning and recovery, hormone balance. And the reality is, if you get your sleep right, everything else gets easier. You can optimize your energy. You can optimize your fat burning capacity, the choices you make in life. And that can come down to food, but everything in your life. Relationships get better, work productivity optimized. There's not one thing that we can talk about that doesn't get better when sleep is optimized. So it's really, really important, guys. And this is kind of the sort of the cycle of how stress sneaks in. Something is stressful, cortisol will be released, will rise up, which is a stress hormone. And when cortisol rises, it increases cravings. Cravings for, you've guessed it, carbohydrates and fatty foods. You rarely crave protein. No one actually craves protein. And then when the stress goes up, cravings go up, quality of sleep goes down, and invariably we see an increase in body fat. Now, just to be clear, and we're going to talk about this in a bit more detail as we go through this, it's not stress that causes you to gain weight. Hormones will determine behavior, and behavior, if that behavior involves eating more food than you need, taking you to a calorie surplus, that's what causes you to gain weight. But hormones are responsible for behavior. It just means that behavior is very hard to ignore. Okay? So stress will feed poor sleep, and poor sleep fuels more stress. And you've got this continual loop going round and round and round, and it's often very hard to get out of. So let's look at some daily habits that you can look at. Call it Sleep Hygiene 101. And there's loads of different things that we can do to improve sleep. I've boiled it down to a few of the main ones of the movers that are going to make a big difference to your sleep habits and your hygiene. And the big one is this: go to bed and wake up at the same time. And that's 7 days a week. Easier said than done if you've got a busy social life, typically at the weekends for most people. But whether it's 10:30, 11, and getting up at 6 or 7, whatever your schedule is, try and adhere to it as often as possible. And it's one of the best things you can do, because what it does, it sets a circadian rhythm, and everything is working on that circadian clock all the time. Second thing, get morning sunlight exposure. Now, if you're living in the UK or Northern Europe in the winter, it's easier said than done. If you're anywhere else around the world, it's going to be easier. But it doesn't have to be bright sunlight. It just needs some sunlight through cloud will actually be enough to help. And what this does, again, it sets a circadian rhythm. Big one, no screens 1 hour before bed. That includes phone, laptop, TV. Ideally, you want to shut them down and start preparing for bed and develop some sort of sleep ritual. It's going to be one of the best things you can do. And avoid caffeine after 2 p.m. or 8 hours after your alarm wakes you up. So it would be 2 p.m. if you get up at 6. If you get up at 7, it would be 3 p.m. And the reason being, caffeine's got a half-life of about 5 to 6 hours. So 5 to 6 hours after your last coffee, half the amount of caffeine that was in that coffee is still going to be circulating in your blood. And if you're sensitive to sleep, it's going to be enough to keep you awake. Okay, you really need to start looking. Everyone talks about optimizing their energy and their productivity during the day, and sleep is almost like this afterthought. When you think about it, we spend 6 to 8 hours of sleep on average. Yet it's seen as this thing that we just have to do at the end of the day. We need to break it down and look. This is the third of my life, and I'm going to optimize this or put as much effort into getting quality sleep as I do everything else in my life, going to the gym, taking care of my health, eating quality food. It really is should be something more sacred than it actually is for most people. We've kind of touched on caffeine a little bit, but here are the sleep killers to avoid. Caffeine, obviously, are later than 8 hours after your alarm clock. Big meals at night. This won't make any difference in terms of fat loss because overall calories are the key. But what a big meal at night, too late before bedtime, will actually increase your body temperature. When your body temperature is raised, it's harder to want to get sleep and stay asleep. We want to optimize that room. Your body wants to be cool. Alcohol before bed, big one. Look, we're not going to get into the pros and the cons of alcohol. We all know the the downsides of alcohol. We all know the upsides of alcohol. I mean, there's very few, but it can be good fun. And it is socially acceptable. It's the socially accepted drug. So let's not kid ourselves and say we need to eliminate it entirely, although individually that may be something you need to do. But we want to certainly avoid it a couple of hours before bed, which ironically is the time most people tend to drink, is in the evening. Blue light from the screens, we talked about that. Irregular bedtimes. All of these disrupt melatonin, your deep sleep, and your fat loss. And actually, we burn body fat when we're sleeping. Obviously, your body, your brain needs to function on something. So we'll actually burn body fat when you're asleep. Now, it's only a small amount. You could say, well, I'll sleep more and burn more body fat. We want to be sleeping more to optimize the use of body fat in the night. But it's not something that is going to make a huge difference. But ultimately, poor sleep is going to lead to those cravings that we talk about. Those cravings leads to overeating in most people, and it's going to cause fat gain, which is the opposite of fat loss. We touched on the bedtime ritual. Like stretching yoga is fantastic. The stretching, particularly, something I do, just a couple of stretches, just to, cool the body down. Read a book, not from your phone, from your Kindle, an actual physical book. I dare you to stay awake a lot longer than 15 minutes. I do it every night because it's one of the best things to do for me to get to sleep. But I end up reading the same page several nights in a row. I've read the same couple of pages the last few nights. I think I need to come to bed a little bit earlier so I can actually read past this page. I keep having to go back. But reading from a book knocks me out. Magnesium, I take magnesium. Herbal tea is a great way. Warm shower or bath, fantastic. Ironically, it's almost the opposite of what happens. A super warm shower or bath cools you down internally. When you come out, you hit the air, that actually drops your inner core temperature. And journaling is a great technique that can just, excuse me, get your thoughts, feelings out on paper, any worries, any concerns, plan the next day. It's a good idea to sort of download everything you've got going on paper, and physically writing this down is another way of almost letting the mind just calm down. And the brain loves consistency before bed. So when you optimize this routine or create this bedtime ritual, you want to keep doing it. And it's not going to happen. I read a book once and my sleep's amazing. It's not going to work like that. It's going to take a couple of weeks, a couple of months. Continual consistency is the key with anything, as you guys know. Talking about building the perfect sleep environment, we mentioned keeping the room cool, 15 to 19 degrees. 15 is pretty chilly, if I'm completely honest. 18 or 19 is where I prefer, but some people prefer colder. Darkness, you want to have blackout curtains or sleep mask if you can't do that. Maybe you're in a hotel, it's not not practical or possible. We want to make it as quiet as possible, of course. White noise or earplugs. I've got hearing problems, so I don't need any of them. And a clean, cozy bed. Mattress is obviously important. Everyone's got a different preference, but your bedroom should feel like a sleep sanctuary. So two things happen in the bedroom, and one of them is not watching TV. Two things: sex and sleep. Keep it that way. Jumped ahead of myself. Mattress, memory foam, latex or hybrid. Choose what works best for you. I've got dodgy hips and a dodgy lower back, so medium firm works for me. Pillow again, devices. We talked about this. White noise can be a great way to just relax the brain. Aura ring, I've got mine somewhere, should be wearing it. Whoop, and a sunrise alarm clock. My wife uses one of those sunrise alarm clocks. I think it's called a Lumi, and it just comes on slowly, and the light just brings you out of sleep rather than being awakened abruptly by an alarm, which can increase your cortisol, which is probably one of the last things you want. Actually, cortisol increases is actually what wakes you up, but you don't want a sudden, sharp, shrill of an alarm clock, which can make you jump awake. Slow awakening is the best thing you can do for your body. So let's look at some of the supplements you can add into your diet, and we'll look at the food first. The foods that contain magnesium: nuts, obviously be aware of the calories. Dark chocolate, that's a great shout. Greens, all the vegetables, high levels of magnesium. Tryptophan, which just relaxes the body. Turkey, eggs, and seeds. And complex carbs, oats and sweet potato. Any complex carbs actually will. Carbohydrates are one of the best things to have in the evening. If you're eating carbs, typically carbs in the morning for most people will tend to make them feel a little tired. Certainly if you have a high carb lunch, if you have a jacket spud or potatoes, or pasta at lunchtime, we've all been in a meeting in the afternoon and you've started to feel really sleepy and tired. But guess what we want come 9, 10 p.m. So your evening meal should probably have the most carbohydrates that you've had throughout the day. Supplements: magnesium glycinate, excellent. L-theanine, which is found in green tea and various supplements, but it doesn't give you that buzz. And ashwagandha. Melatonin is fantastic, but it should only be used short term or for jet lag, because melatonin is actually a hormone that's produced in the pineal gland, which is a little gland that sits right in the center of your brain there. And it's released when the brain senses it's getting dark. So as soon as the sun goes down and it gets dark, the body will start to release melatonin. So if you supplement melatonin, it will actually cause your endogenous supply to stop being produced. So that's not something, we don't want that. So you don't want to use it every day. You can use it 3 or 4 times a day, but only at a small degree, small level, 0.3 of a milligram. You see some of these tablets, it's actually banned in the UK. Some of these tablets are 1 milligram or even 3, even 5 milligram tablet. I've taken a 5 milligram tablet before. You literally feel like you're being sedated and you wake up and you're in a coma it feels like you're in a coma the next morning. Small amounts and only short term or for jet lag. Moving away from sleep, let's look at how stress wrecks the body. We talked about cortisol. Increased cortisol from stress. It's a stress-related hormone. More body fat potentially. Again, only if you overeat. So it could definitely cause higher cravings. It can absolutely wreck your sleep, and it can increase the chance of you developing insulin resistance. But insulin resistance really only occurs when you tend to increase body fat. Okay, so stress can potentially put your body in fat storage mode, but again, you won't actually gain fat if you don't overeat. It definitely can rate your sleep disruption, and then you can get this opposite of I can't even think of my words. Stress cycle going round and round and round, like a negative spiral going down. One feeds the other. Increased stress, overeat, causes sleep disruption. Sleep disruption tends to make you more stressed. You go round and round and round. So how do we manage stress? Of course, stress is inevitable to a certain extent, but there are certain things we can do in the moment. Breath work. There's breathing in for 4, exhale for 7, hold for 7, exhale for 8. In for 4, hold for 7, exhale for 8. Do that several times. Or box breathing, where it's 4, 4, 4, and 4. Inhale, hold, exhale, hold. Go round and round on that. Fantastic way of doing that. Meditation or going for a walk, simple as that. Exercise really reduces stress, short term and long term. Walking can count. Walking is one of the most underutilized tool in the fat loss puzzle, and underutilized when it comes to reducing stress, relieving stress. Headphones in, or maybe even without the headphones, get out there, big deep breaths, oxygenate the blood, the brain rather, with some oxygenated blood. Various adaptogens, rhodiola and holy basil, or holy basil, as we would say in the UK. Basil would be American or North American. And simply speaking to someone. Problem shared is a problem halved, as they say. Talk to someone about your problems, about the stresses you've got. But here's the feedback loop that often happens. Okay, poor sleep. Let's assume maybe poor sleep is from anything, but let's say you've got poor sleep. If you're sleeping bad, you're going to wake up in a stressed position. I don't mean a position, in a mental stress position. That high stress can often lead to more cravings. The more cravings leads to the consumption of poor food choices, and those poor food choices often create poor sleep. Again, goes round and round. So how do we break the loop? We talked about sleep rituals, mindful eating, and daily breath work. The mindful eating, I'm just going to touch on that as we mentioned that. Most of us are eating on what I call a subconscious level or an unconscious level. We just eat. Very few people actually take time to look at the meal in front of them, consciously focus on what they're eating, and almost be grateful for that food. Sometimes just slowing down, and I'm talking to myself here. I don't always do this. I hail my food, but just taking your time, breathing in between breaths, putting your fork down, and actually being conscious. What am I actually eating here? What have I got on my plate? I've got my protein, I've got my carbohydrates, I've got my vegetables, I've got my fats. But most people are just almost a slave to their desires, to that dopamine rush, take anything from the cupboard. And we've all been there eating things that we didn't even want to eat just because it was like a response. To think about this. And this is what can happen short term from poor sleep. Ghrelin and leptin, they're two what we call hunger hormones. Okay, when we get poor sleep, it will increase the amount of ghrelin released in the body, and this makes you more hungry. So ghrelin is a hormone that tells you that you're hungry. So when you feel hungry, ghrelin is doing its job, and it's designed specifically to make you go and eat food from a survival perspective. So ghrelin goes up, increases your hunger. Now, poor sleep also decreases leptin, and leptin is what we call the satiety hormone. So when leptin is high, it increases how full you feel. So you get that feeling you've had enough food. Obviously, if you're eating slowly, sometimes it takes 15, 20 minutes for the food to hit your stomach. Sometimes, if you notice, when you shove a load of food in, then 20 minutes later, you get that massive full feeling, which is why I want to slow down and have that mindful eating. But leptin goes down, which stops you feeling full. So imagine having hormones that make you more hungry and less full, which is the complete opposite of what we would want when it comes to, body fat as a goal. Increased cortisol, more cravings. So not only have we got that, we're more hungry, we're less full, we've got more cravings. And then as this happens, as body fat increases, we're less sensitive to insulin, which is insulin resistance to a certain extent, which also increases hunger. This is what causes insulin resistance and then potentially diabetes type 2. Type 1 is something slightly different. Okay, and this can come from poor sleep. So in terms of metabolic damage, poor sleep is horrendous. Okay. So quality sleep is driving the opposite of this, which is what we want. So think about that again. Let me just recap on that because it's really, really important. Poor sleep, ghrelin goes up, makes you more hungry. Leptin goes down, which makes you feel less full. Increased cortisol, more cravings for fatty, salty, carby foods, and less insulin sensitivity. Sensitive to insulin goes down, again increases hunger. Recipe for disaster. So how do we eat to sleep or to promote good sleep and burn fat? Simple. You guys know this already, but let's go over it. We want to eat whole foods, lots of protein, as you guys know, and healthy fats, balance. We don't want to cut anything out. Of course, we want to keep an eye on avoiding, the processed snacks, the empty carbs, and excess sugar. There's nothing wrong with sugar itself. In excess is what we want to avoid. The great thing for the best sleep is to stop eating 2 to 3 hours before bed. I said whenever we eat, we actually increase our temperature, our internal body temperature, which is how we generate heat. But you have a huge meal before dinner. I tracked my my Aura tracked my sleep the other day. We have a pizza every Friday night, and my resting heart rate was 10 beats higher, and my temperature was I can't think off the top of my head, but I know it was raised. But I thought it was fascinating that my resting heartbeat overnight was 10 beats high on average on the night where I had about 12 slices of pizza. I went to bed feeling pretty bloated. I found it hard to get sleep. My internal temperature was raised, resting heart rate. That was just from food, and that was no alcohol. And alcohol will make it even worse. Okay. Hydrate early in the day. I've also made the mistake of my water too close to bedtime. I'll be up peeing in the night. So we want to limit the alcohol. We want to obviously increase the water. We want that, but we want to stop the intake of water for a couple of hours before we go to bed. So make sure you get all your hydration done early on in the day. So the better you eat, you're going to create better sleep environment. You're going to get better quality sleep, and in turn, that is going to help you burn body fat more efficiently. You're going to get better results from what we're trying to do. Some of the simple ways to manage stress, we kind of touched on it before. Walking, strength training, lifting weights is one of the best ways to alleviate or mitigate stress. Yoga and mobility. Look, NEAT, you all know that acronym, non-exercise activity thermogenesis. This is the movement you do when you're not actually physically exercising. So it could be how you fidget, when someone gesticulates a lot when they talk. The movement, what I'm doing at the moment is NEAT. All these things over the day, they burn calories. Okay. So whenever you feel stress, get out for a walk. Simple as that. Move your body. Okay. Movement is stress relief. If you start reframing it rather than, I have to exercise, if you're feeling stressed, exercise is one of the first things we want to be doing. Okay, stress relief, not punishment. Let's look at what I call the habit loop. We want to build habits around sleep and stress. Okay, build those habits around sleep and stress. So we want to swap the doom scrolling on your phone for stretching, swap snacking for journaling, and stack new habits onto existing routines. That's one of the best ways to bring in new habits into your routines. Okay. Cue, routine, reward. Every time you go to do a doom scroll at night before you go to bed, think, could I just do 5-10 minutes of light stretching? Think about that. A good way to get this in place is to have some sort of accountability, and you can use a habit tracker. Okay. And you can just mark down the things that you want to look at, that you want to work on. Sleep, your movement, breath work, no screens before bed, food choices. Okay. And what we're trying to get here is we're not looking for perfection. No one's going to be perfect. We're not looking for that. But we're looking for continual progress. And that's going to come from consistency. So if we're looking to change anything in our life, it's always going to come from consistency. Going all that, all guns blazing for a week or two and then nothing is not going to create a habit. It's not going to see a change in your results. So it's doing a couple of things consistently for a period of months. That's where we're going to see the change. Now we talked about a lot there. Where do we start? Rather than trying to do everything all at once, this would be the 5 things I've broken it down to. This would be the things to look at first. Call it your 5-step game plan. So first of all would be to fix your sleep schedule. Okay, we talked about that. Go back over this and have a look. Fix your sleep schedule will make a huge difference. Get that nighttime ritual, that 1.5 to 2 hours before lights out. Screen time, reading, supplements. Lock it in 7 nights of the week. Okay, or we want to eat to regulate hormones. Quality carbs, good protein, good fats, balance is the key to regulating your hormones. Okay, lower stress through daily movement, and we want to look at this for 30 days. So we need to do the same things every day consistently for 30 days to see some real changes. And if you're struggling with sleep and stress, give this a go for 30 days. It can be a real game changer. All right, guys, hope that made sense. I'll see you in the next one.